Yep.
Okay. Welcome back. And this is day 4 of our March meetings. And today we're turning our attention to EER and ISO 600. The first part will be EER, and hopefully we'll get approval of the excellent work that's been undertaken after we have some board discussion, and then we'll begin the first round of 600 comments. I just wanted to pause for a second. Vili, you had a couple of announcements that you wanted to make before we got going.
Okay, thank you, Tom. You caught me off guard there. I thought we were going to do it between the 2 sessions, but it's fine. We can do it now. So I thought I just wanted to make a few announcements to the board regarding changes at the staff level. So let me, you always have the bad news, good news thing. So let me start with the bad news first. So Yvonne Chan will be leaving us. She's returning to KPMG. So her last day with us will be on March 24. And obviously very sad to see Yvonne go, but very excited for her new opportunity that she has. But we will sincerely miss her. And then also, I wanted to use the opportunity to just welcome 2 new staff members. The one staff member has already joined us. That's Megan Light. She joined us as an executive administrative assistant. So she will, so together with Michelle, they will take care of us on that side. And then on March 29, we have filled our vacant principal position. When Joy left last year, we had a vacant principal position. So we have filled that principal position, and Amy Fairchild will be joining us from Minneapolis in the USA, where she's currently a senior manager in the National Professional Standards Group at RSM. So she will be joining us on March 29. Thank you, Tom.
To keep you on your toes, Vili. Made more sense up front than in the middle, but I probably should have told you. Okay. Any other reflections before we begin today's business? Okay, I see none. So, Lynn, we've all received the turnaround document, agenda item 3B updated. Thank you for the task force's diligence in turning it around so quickly and giving us time to read it. Clearly, it seems like you've responded to a number of comments, so thank you for that, including our discussion on the famous, maybe infamous Appendix 3 by now. But we will turn it over to you to introduce the changes and then like commentary, and then we'll see where we are and see if we can get approval.
Thank you very much, Tom. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. Well, hello everybody and welcome back to EER. I'd like to say thank you for all your comments. They have been helpful to us, and what we heard on Monday was strong support for this guidance, that there were no fatal flaws, and that was of course welcome news. Over the past 2 days, we have carefully considered the various comments we received, both in writing and at the meeting, and the turnaround document you received yesterday has been marked up to show all the changes we've made, and I will talk through the more substantive changes shortly. Before I do, though, I wanted to just reiterate the framework that we used to make those changes. Firstly, where the ideas were new, we simply couldn't introduce them at this very late stage, so there is no change. We didn't necessarily change all minor editorial or minor changes if they were matters of personal preference. Thirdly, we recognise that some of the wording was could be more technically precise, but we have erred on the side of technically okay and plain English to help the guidance be clearer. And finally, we took very seriously, of course, Appendix 3 and made changes, and I will come back to that. Next slide, please. The first thing we did was some clarifications, and they were largely around the definitions to make sure we were consistent on EER information and EER reporting and subject information through the entire document. We also made sure we were consistent on engagement partner and practitioner, and we made a decision to use ISQC1 with a footnote to ISQM1. We did that because the guidance becomes effective immediately, and of course we are some way off the implementation of ISQM1. We also went through and made sure that the word uncertainty was used in a consistent way throughout the document. So all of those changes have been made. Next slide, please. On the introduction, there's two areas that I'd like to draw your attention to. The first in paragraph 10, where we've removed the reference to auditing standards as it was felt this was confusing. We also clarified that the standard accommodates assurance on both financial and non-financial information. And there's a little bit more to come with some comments we received overnight on that particular paragraph, some suggested changing in wording. Then in paragraph 17, we clarified that while practitioners may be able to adapt the guidance to a direct engagement, the guidance has been developed with a focus on has not been developed with a focus on direct engagements. So therefore we have put that up front so we don't need to flow it down through the document, and some of the ongoing comments relate to that as well, but we are comfortable with where we are there. Moving on, Michelle, please. We've updated paragraph 121 to clarify that a self-review threat might be created if the practitioner is involved in the preparation of subject matter information that subsequently becomes subject matter information of the attestation rather than the assurance engagement. IAASB have agreed with the differentiation in this context between the requirements of direct and attestation engagements. In paragraph 117, we have not and don't intend to make the change to attestation engagement. We have retained the reference to assurance engagement. Again, this reflects IAASB's comment. A threat to the practitioner's independence may arise in both a direct and an attestation engagement if the practitioner were to provide suggestions to management, for example, about the underlying subject matter for the proposed EER engagement. IAASB is of the view that changing assurance to attestation in this paragraph would be unduly limiting. And when we get to the overnight comments, this is the reason we are not making a change. In paragraph 121, the context needs to be an attestation engagement, as obviously in a direct engagement, the practitioner is involved in the preparation of the subject matter information. Paragraph 460 also includes a reference to attestation for similar reasons. Moving right on. On Chapter 11, one board member commented that there should not be a suggestion that the practitioner could assure the reasonableness of assumptions. Although the word had been included to replace the term feasible in the previous version, it was not considered appropriate. So we have changed the word to reflect the practitioner's focus on whether there is a reasonable basis for the assumptions. And this aligns with IAASB 3400. In Chapter 12, we've made a change to the illustrative limited assurance report under the heading summary of the work we performed as the basis for our assurance conclusion. We have indicated that in a limited assurance engagement, the practitioner includes a summary of the nature and extent of the procedures performed in that practitioner's judgment, provides additional information that may be relevant to the user's understanding of the basis for the assurance conclusions. That section therefore needs to be tailored to reflect what the practitioner has done, and the wording we have introduced is in line with the illustrative assurance examples in 3410. We've also included additional wording that links to Appendix 3. Next slide, please. On Monday, we heard that from 3 practitioners that they'd like changes to Appendix 3, and from another 3 that they really liked Appendix 3. So we have carefully balanced what we have done to Appendix 3 between those 2 different views. We have significantly strengthened the introduction to Appendix 3, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank Billy and Brett for doing some of the heavy lifting in that regard. We have also put changes through at the top of each group of arrows to make sure that people using the guidance don't think that there are 3 different levels of limited assurance. There is a range or a spectrum that people can choose between depending on the nature and circumstances of the engagement. My understanding of the comments we received overnight is that people are comfortable with the changes we've made in this regard. Next slide, please. Okay, before we actually move on to this approval, we did receive some comments overnight that I'd just like to run through how we have decided to handle those. Michelle, do we have yet the slot? Yes, it's coming up. Can I, while it's coming up, can I say that the minor editing changes that you have been suggested will be put through in the final version, as is normal practice. These are some of the more significant changes, none of which I consider to be fatal flaws that we thought we'd just run through how we intend to dispose of each one. The first comment was on paragraph 10 and just expanded the words in terms of financial and non-financial information. The words on screen reflect that, and we are happy to make that change. We had a comment on paragraphs 48 and 49. They are about the standard rather than the guidance, so we note them but don't intend to make any changes. In terms of paragraphs 76 and 117.
1 second, Lynn. Maybe I have a big monitor, but maybe we could zoom the screen and to get the whole page width in to allow people to see it. Better?
That's better. Thank you. Okay, I've covered the first 2 points that are on screen. So if we can scroll down, that's it. Leave it there. Thank you. On the paragraphs in terms of a direct engagement and in terms of an attestation engagement, for the reasons I've already stated in the presentation, we are not making any changes there. Scroll down, please. This is a small edit, so I'm going to jump over that. In terms of paragraph 270, we made some changes, but one board member has come back and we are happy to go back to the original wording on that. Scroll down, please. On 274, it's for the reasons that we think it's more plain English. We don't intend to make the changes proposed in 274. Keep going down, please. Next one is an editing issue, so we will put that one through. And in terms of chapter 11, and rather than you all having to read all of those words, the key issue is whether future orientated information can be assured. And whilst those words don't sit nicely together in isolation, in the context of the paragraphs, it is, in our opinion, clear that if the criteria are suitable and if you can gather an adequate evidence, you can assure future orientated information. So we believe that that's the answer to that question, and we don't propose to make any changes. Next, please. Another wording, a couple of wording changes here that we will make. And finally, we have got, and sorry, I can't see there the struck through text on that one.
This one? We're at the right one? Or, okay.
Just want to make sure everybody's seen it.
Lynn, I think the strike-through text was literally just referencing the criteria which you'd taken out on the limited assurance opinion. So it was just a consistency point.
You can't see the strike through here. It's the simplified version. You have to go to review and then switch to, it's not simple markup, all markup. There you go.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
It's deleting the last 6 words. Scroll down, please. Okay, I don't remember seeing this one, so Pauline, I'm going to ask you or Misha to come in on this, and I'll come back to the definition of substantive testing. I think, Pauline, I'll come back to you. If we can just scroll down the final words. Keep going, because these are all minor edits. We've added professional judgment. We have go back up. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay.
Deleted an S. Pauline, can I ask you to come in on the substantive testing one, please?
Yes, sure, Lynn. This was in Appendix 1 in the definitions. We had included the definition of substantive testing, but the question is, based on this definition, does this mean that procedures performed to obtain an understanding are then substantive testing? And I can see how that doesn't sit neatly. And if we keep the substantive testing within the text, I mean, I'm wondering if we even need this definition.
Okay, I think at this stage we'll delete the definition, because there's common understanding of it, and if it's causing problems, my suggestion is, on behalf of the task force, that we delete the definition. Okay, in that case, those are all the changes that are proposed, bar some very minor editing ones, of which some of them we've already shown you. So, Tom, I'm comfortable now that the guidance is in a state to be put to the vote, unless there's any discussion.
So we'll invite a discussion. Lynn, just a practical detail. Someone asked me whether it would be possible to get, for the record, the slides and the Word document, so they have, so they could track the changes of the committee's logic. Is that possible for board members?
Of course they can.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I assume that was the case. Okay. Any comments on the task force's work and consideration of comments? Ada.
Yes, thank you, Tom. And Lynn, many thanks for making the changes in the short time frame. I am very happy with where it is now, also in the context of Appendix 3. Happy with the way you've addressed those. I had one comment though, and that is in respect of the insertion that you did in the assurance report, which says that in limited assurance engagement, the practitioner may insert a summary of the nature and extent of procedures. And I was wondering, because if I look at 3069K, that actually reads an informative summary of the work performed as the base for the practitioner's conclusion in case of a limited assurance engagement. An appreciation of the nature, timing, and extent of procedures performed is essential to understanding the practitioner's conclusion. So I think that I read that more as a requirement than as a may. And that's really the only comment that I wanted to raise at this point. And other than that, congratulations, you have my vote.
Thank you. Lynn, you want to respond?
Can I comment on that, please? Absolutely, it is essential that that information is put in the assurance report. However, the convention is that we're not allowed to use the word shall or essential. We're not allowed to put requirements into guidance. So there are a number of places where we've had to put may for that convention. So that's the reason it says may. I agree with your logic entirely, but it is something we must comply with.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Julie?
Thanks, Tom, and thank you. I thought I should probably comment because I was one of the ones that had expressed some concern the other day about Appendix 3, and we're quite happy with where it's landed, and we're very thankful to you and the task force for taking our comments on board. So I just wanted to thank you that we'd sent through some editorials. Maybe time wasn't quite on our side compared to others, and nothing in there is significant. It would just be for your consideration as you finalize the document.
Thank you, Julie. Kai?
Good evening, Tom. Many thanks. I have one comment referring to paragraph 76 and 117. It seems to me that the changes proposed to these both paragraphs, as I have mentioned, 76 and 117, are the wrong way around. The matters relate to attestation engagements and not direct engagements. Shouldn't the change refer to attestation rather than direct engagements? That's my question. That's all, Tom. Thanks.
Lynn, do you want a moment to consider that comment before you respond?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Wendy?
Okay. Hi, thank you. Lynn and the task force, an incredible job in such a short period of time with a high volume of comments, I am guessing. And I think you have done an unbelievable job in addressing them, and I don't have any other concerns. I particularly want to also say that Appendix 3 is much better. I read the whole thing. I read it with, clean. It makes a lot more sense, and the colors can be dealt with at another time. I had a question on 412, and now I need to just bring it up. And it's the one. 412 is where it says the practitioner may put. Sorry. Okay. When the criteria are not included or publicly available, referred to in the subject matter information, or not otherwise made available in a suitable manner by the preparer, the practitioner may need to include them in the assurance report. And my only concern with that one was whether or not that implied you also needed to even reconsider your acceptance process or something like that related to why the practitioner may have to put it in the report when it wasn't. It doesn't really address if that was considered up front or not.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Just Lynn, thank you for your response. But I just wanted to get back to that, because in other areas, and I think there's about 6 instances in the EER where the standard is quoted, where it says, well, the standard requires, and I'm thinking whether that could be an option to utilize in that sentence, or maybe to say something, it is important that. May seems voluntarily, and yeah, I struggle with that suggestion for the petitioner, who says, well, yeah, it says may, so I'm not going to do it. Thank you.
Okay, it's an effort to make it more suggestive. Wendy, your hand went up and went down. Is it up? Okay, it's up.
It's up. I just wanted to clarify that the suggestion in 412 is just to remove where it says and to meet the requirements of the standard. The part about reconsidering client acceptance or what was in the engagement letter is not as critical. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so you very few comments, a couple ones, Lynn, you may want to address now. We clarified the point to Edo. He suggested slight strengthening.
Yep.
And
okay, Wendy's comment we can definitely take on board. Edo's comment, Billy, can you just confirm to me that his suggestion would be acceptable?
Yeah, Lynn, I think that should be fine.
Okay, in that case, we'll accept Wendy and Edo's comments. On Kaioi's, we've had this discussion for a long time. We've got agreement with IAASB, and for the reasons I have already said, I think we're begging to differ at this point in time, and so my proposal is still status quo, and I accept, Kaioi, that you won't be comfortable with that, but I think where we're at is correct. So, Tom, those are my responses to the three of them. Pauline, is there anything you'd like to add? Or Misha?
Yes, if I may. I think if I'm understanding correctly, Kaiyovi's point was on the table that was brought up on screen, which mentions in a direct engagement when it actually should read in an attestation engagement.
Okay,
I think we've just made an error on that table, but actually we've got the comments that say in an attestation engagement, so we should replace it with in an attestation engagement was the point.
Okay.
Which we've said we're not going to do in 117 and 76, so it doesn't change the outcome, but I think that was perhaps the point that was being made.
Okay, my apologies. I obviously am trying to read in a hurry. Misha, can we change that table before we distribute it to people, please, to get it correct? But yes, the outcome's the same. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions? Okay. I'll pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. I think we're going to get to the point of approval of this material. I just wanted to remind you, I said it the other day, and people will be questioning why we're doing what we're doing in terms of approval or non-authoritative guidance. Just remind you that there was agreement at the outset of the project, at the time of the project proposal, to follow a process that's very similar to our normal process for deliberating and progressing a standard setting project, including discussion, public session, and all of the normal trappings of standard development. I think it was really important precisely because the growing importance of EER, as we know, and the reported ecosystem, and to give people confidence that we've benefited from so much input and had the opportunity to deliberate on this. So, we will have a lot of the trappings in this approval session of a normal vote to approve a standard, even though this is non-authoritative guidance. I just wanted to ask Lynn, from your perspective, if you feel we've met the high standard of deliberation before we put anything to a vote.
Thank you, Tom. In the task force's view, the significant matters it has identified as a result of its deliberations since the beginning of this project and its considerations thereon have been reflected in the agenda material presented to the IAASB at its meetings. In the task force's view, there are no significant matters it has discussed in this project that have not been brought to the IAASB's attention. The task force does not believe that further consultation is needed, given the input from stakeholders far and wide over the course of this project as a whole. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Lynn, for that. Zilly, as our technical director, I just wanted to ask you if you think we're ready to proceed to voting.
Thank you, Tom. In light of the nature of the document under consideration, I advise that the board followed an appropriate process as has been agreed for this project in relation to the development of non-authoritative guidance on applying ISA 3000 revised to EER assurance engagements up to as well as during this March 2021 IAASB meeting. Tom, I hand back to you to conduct the vote.
Okay. Now, is everyone ready to vote? Anyone not ready to vote? Don't see anyone for the record. Okay, just to be clear, what we're voting on is the approval of non-authoritative material for public release, subject to the slight amendments that were discussed today. So what we'll do first, just based upon my assessment, is we'll ask by show of hands digitally who's voting for the release of the document. And I'll raise my hand physically. It's up. I got one thumbs up. Whoever put the thumbs up, does that mean a positive vote?
Didn't you say to put up a reaction?
A hand, but like a raise.
Oh, in the here? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let the record show that I have 17 digital hands up and my physical hand up. That means 18 votes for the guidance. It also means everyone can put their hands down. It means I don't have to ask anyone for the reasons for dissenting from the approval. So we'll skip that step. And I just wanted to, first of all, congratulate the task force. And I'd be remiss too, because he's not here, Marek too, who was sort of the path, the trailblazer on this project, to not to congratulate him as well, but congrats, Lynn, and to the team who've done just a terrific job. So congratulations. Lynn, I turn it back to you for some reflections.
Thank you very much. Michelle, do you think you could take down the slide so I can actually see people, please, before I start? Thank you very much for that, Tom. And thank you all very much for that unanimous vote. That was a real pleasure to see. I've got a number of thank yous I would like to make because this project has involved a lot of people and a lot of time, and there's a lot of people deserving appreciation. First of all, I'd like to thank board members, current and past, for their input to this guidance. It has been tremendous. And I'd also like to acknowledge the TAs who have done have also provided significant input. To our project advisory group and to the CAG, thank you so much for all the valuable input. A lot of the practitioners' pragmatic input has come from those sources, And I know that many of those calls have been at unsociable hours for people, particularly on my side of the world. And I'm grateful for the additional time and effort you all put into not only reading the documents, but making such thoughtful comments. I'd like to thank all of the people and entities that commented on the 2 exposure drafts. It is undoubtedly true that those comments had a significant impact on the quality of the guidance that we see before us today. Turning to the staff, I'd like to thank all 4 staff who worked on this guidance. Pauline, who has done all of the heavy lifting in phase 2 and has in many cases gone above and beyond the job that she was contracted to do. Pauline, the sterling job you've done, both in terms of a technical job, but also making sure that the guidance was practical and that we had a good range of examples, is most sincerely appreciated, both by me and by the board. And I'd like to put on public record sincere thanks to you. Alistair Nielsen was our staff member at the beginning of this project, who took us through the roundtables and the first phase of the project. And I'd like to also record our appreciation of the significant work he did in giving this work a firm foundation. To Misha Peters and Sylvia Van Dyke, the last few months I couldn't have done without you, your support of Pauline, and in particular I'd like to thank Misha, who was the one who did all the amendments to the guidance over those 3 months. So Misha, we are very grateful that on top of your day job you also helped out on this, so my sincere thanks. To the task force, Sasha Coe, Fernando, Roger, Paul Penter and Mario, can I thank you very, very much. It's been a long journey for us, but a very rewarding one. And I'd like to thank you all not only for your hard work, but also for your support as we've worked through these various drafts and as we have debated both conceptually, principally and pragmatically what this guidance needed to say. Each one of you have made a significant contribution, and I wish to publicly record my sincere thanks for that. I'd also just like to note that we did have some fun along the way, and I think that that foundation was very helpful as we brought this to fruition over the last 12 months with the help of Mr. and Mrs. Zoom. So thank you for that, just entertaining us as well as putting in the hard yards in terms of work. Tom has already talked about Marek, and we wouldn't be here in this position today without Marek. Marek had the vision, the innovation, and the determination to make this project happen. And he also had the foresight of what was happening in the reporting arena, and has put us in a position to land this guidance at a perfect time. So Marek, for all of those things, plus your sheer hard work and commitment, This board owes you a great debt, and we are very, very grateful to you for all of those great traits that you brought to this project. And finally, and very importantly, I'd like to thank Mario Abela for not only being a part of the task force and a very active and valuable member of the task force, but also for the fact that it was him and Merrick who negotiated the financial support for this work. And I'd like to thank the WBCDS and the Moore Foundation for their support, both financially, but also with a significant body of work around this, this guidance that will mean that the people of across the globe are well supported in terms of the future of EER. So Mario, thank you so much, and please pass on our sincere thanks to both of the organisations. Tom, with that, I hope that this guidance is used across the globe, and I hope it proves of value. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Very well said, and thank you again to the team for getting so much work done. As I said, I don't think this topic will be the last time we deal with similar issues, but I'm pretty confident that we have a pretty strong foundation out there as areas such as ESG reporting and sustainability reports become more the norm over time. So great, thank you, board. I don't know, Carol or Jim, you have anything you'd like to add from a PIOB or CAG perspective, having now seen the approval of this document?
Well, I think from a CAG perspective, well, first, thanks to Lynn and her task force and all the people that participated on this journey. But I do know, based on the consistent feedback from the CAG, this was very high up in terms of a priority, and I think they're seeing that a new, I don't say a new world, but a new area of auditing and a test, and under 3,000, this will be something that will provide some guidance as it relates to ESG. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the comments that the CAG has given you and Merrick, and for reflecting those or considering those comments. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. And Carol?
Yes, thank you very much, Tom. This is a very important document on a topic that will only increase in importance. And on behalf of the PIOB, I would like to commend Lynn, the task force, the staff and the board for working through this lengthy document that people were afraid of when they saw it the first time, I do remember. But the document has become much more accessible and much better to understand and to read. And that is to a large extent due to the big amount of work that was put into this. My wish would be that in one way or another, as a follow-up, the board could help to assure that stakeholders who are not so familiar with this topic would also understand and better perceive what auditors can and cannot do in this space. This is a lengthy document, and maybe there is a way to express it in more simple terms for the stakeholders, because they are the ones that are insisting that there is some form of assurance in this important area. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. And there's one other person we should acknowledge too in this process before we conclude, is that course, Marek wasn't the first chair of the task force, but Maren Kelso of Australia also had a role in getting the project off the ground. And again, this has been a big team effort. So thank you to everyone involved. Thank you for the board. Lynn, again, not sure that you bargained to be the chair of this when this started, but you got it home. So congratulations to you and thank you to. We're gonna turn right away to 600. We have a lot to do. 600's at a crucial point in the project history, and there's great expectation that we will get something complete this year on it. So I don't want to take up much more time before we turn to it. I'll turn to Len quickly in a short second, but I just wanted to say that as I read the paper, thinking about what we need to focus on, it seems to me the task force on a few of key issues outlined in the paper needs a sense a firm sense of guidance from this board on the key topics, and that they've written the standard or revised the standard to provide more of an illustration of their sense of direction, but not to get us to get wordsmithing yet. It's not quite at that stage yet. And Len, you could correct me if you're wrong, but if I'm wrong, but like, let's not focus so much on the detailed wording. Really, we need to give the task force some guidance on a few key topics today. I think the paper is broken up into 9 sections. We'll try to make it more or less do 4 to 5 of them tonight and go through the rest tomorrow. So Len, I turn it over to you. I know the task force has done a huge amount of consultation, been in regular contact with the regulatory community in particular on this, considering their interest in the topic. And so over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you for the board for spending the next 2 hours and also tomorrow's session with us. We just gone through LCE discussion for the last 2 days in EER, so just I guess retune your mindset to go from from LCE environment into a complex group audit environment. So before I start, I want to thank my task force member and the staff for the work they've done since December. We had Eric and Edo join the task force, and we have already benefited from their perspective as a non-practitioner and a practitioner in our deliberations. We had 7 long video conference meetings since December board meetings, and often the meetings were conducted over 16 different time zones. And in the process, we also done a number of outreach sections, as Tom mentioned earlier. The goal is to ensure that we address all the major comments heard during the ED process, also the input we received in December. And so we are still on track to deliver the final standards in the December meeting later this year. I also want to thank Isabel, Sashiko, and Roger and your TAs for your willingness to speak to members of the task force and the staff in the last few days to provide your initial feedbacks on some of the major issues. And also thank you to the board member who submitted written comments ahead of today's sessions. We had a session with CAG last week. So let me quickly summarize in terms of what we heard. Michelle, could you advance 1 slide? So we had an hour with CAG last week, and we overall received a general support for the enhancement we made in the risk-based approach area, especially the changes made to clarify the important role of the component auditor play in a group audit engagement. There was support for the addition of a paragraph like the paragraph 2 in the X10 ISA 600. It's a paragraph 1B in the draft paper you're seeing today. This is a paragraph that originated in the ISA 220 revised standards, referred to the involvement of other auditors in a non-group audit situation. So almost full support from CAC in terms of inserting that paragraph. There was a comment from Accountancy Europe asking the task force to take into account the audit firm concentration issues in developing ISA 600 in a situation where engagement team may include non-network firm component auditors. There was a comment from the IAASB member from Japan, raised the question on how the task force addressed the comment related to retaining the significant component concept. And IAASB also raised the comments about greater focus on professional judgment in applying risk-based approach and determination of materiality in 600, and suggesting that additional requirements on documenting professional judgment in ISA 600. As Tom said, we take regulators' comments seriously. So after the CAG meeting, I had a follow-up call with the IAASB members who raised the comments and provide them with some of the background information regarding the removal of the significant component concept. And I walked them through the risk-based approach in determining the components to perform audit procedures. In addition, I explained to IAASB members that the draft application material for this meeting still explain the nature and the amount of assets, liability, and transaction may influence the group auditor's determination on which components to perform audit work. So after that exchange, the IAASB member was quite satisfied with the task force decision on removal of significant component concept. And as a suggestion from IAASB member, I also caught up with Sashiko before this meeting to make sure we were on the same page. But let me stop here because Jim was at a meeting last week. So I want to turn over to Jim to see, Jim, do you have anything to add in terms of what we heard from the CAG discussion?
Lynn, thanks. I looked at my notes and thinking of the conversation, I think you pretty well captured the comments from the CAG. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Jim. So we also received a letter from the IFAC SMP advisory group. I think most of you have seen the letter coming through. So I'm not going to go into detail in terms of what they said in the letter, but overall, the SMP is supportive of the direction of the changes in several areas, particularly on paragraph 1B I mentioned earlier. Also, the concept of a consolidation process, SMP was quite happy. And also, in general, the risk-based approach we introduced in ISA 600. But the SMP advisory group also offer a few helpful suggestions in the areas of when component auditors is involved. In the last few weeks, also in the coming weeks, we have met or plan to meet with other IAASB task force and working groups. For example, we had discussion with the IAASB task force on the independence project related to group audit and component auditors. You've heard from the LCE discussion on the scoping issues. So we plan to engage the LCE task force on that subject. Also in the process, a lot of support from the QM project staff. As you know, that this project is intertwined with the QM projects the board approved last December. Also, there were some suggestions from other outreach that ISA 600 task force, you reach out to the audit evidence task force, as well as the fraud working group on issues of common interest. And also in the coming weeks, Tom Willie, the staff, and I will have a session with IAASB and IFIA, and ISA 600 is on the agenda for both meetings. So Tom, I would like to pause here to see if anyone has any comments and questions on the at least a general update I just gave, or I'm happy to just go dive into the issues paper.
Okay, we'll pause a second. Any comments on the outreach and the feedback that we're receiving from that outreach? I see no hands raised, Len. I think people want to dig in.
Okay, great. Michelle, next slide, please. So we had described in Appendix 4 of the issues paper, we're going to break the two sessions into 9 different specific areas seeking your input. Tom had already stated at the beginning that the goal is to get your input on the proposed revisions on those specific areas described in the issues paper. And we provided a first draft of the standard post-ED. And as Tom said, that we are not looking for editorial comments. We're happy to take them offline, but the important thing is to get your directions and input on the way forward. Especially, there are 2 new areas being introduced at today's meeting, materiality and documentation. And on the other 3 areas, applicability, scoping, risk-based approach, communication, we're looking for your reaction in terms of what we've done in the standards. Also important to know that when you look at the draft standards, agenda paper 5A, you may think that there's a lot of changes being done. The track changes has many colors and deletions and a lot of moving around. So I just want to focus that all those changes were made in response to the comments we heard in the ED and also your input back in December. A lot of changes are actually moving the paragraphs around because we as a task force spend a lot of time looking at the structure of the standards and so we did some reorganization. So it may seem to be a lot, but a lot of changes are involving the geography and moving paragraphs around. But again, all the principles proposed in ED stay the same. There hasn't been any major deviation from what we had agreed and proposed in the exposure draft. So with that, Michelle, could you move 1 slide? So the first set of issue I want to present to the board is the introduction section, the scope and applicability. And this is the area we had a robust discussion at the December meeting. So based on the board's feedback and the task force proposed the following changes, as you've seen on the slides. There's a new paragraph 1A and also related application paragraphs. Try to clarify the entry point into the standards by emphasizing the group financial statements through a consolidation process being the entry point. Paragraph 2A to B was added to address the comments raised by Isabel and others using Isabel's famous tobacco shop example to comply with certain regulatory reporting requirements in a single legal entity example where there's no separate business unit or separate ledgers. So in addition to the new paragraph in A to B, the task force has also presented an alternative 2 paragraph options in the issues paper, paragraph 21. for board's consideration and input. I'm happy to say that Isabel and Fabian and the task force staff last week, we spent our time discussing the paragraph A to B and also the 2 paragraph options. And I'll let Isabel to comment on her initial reaction based on what we proposed, but the task force spent hours try to address her comments in this area. Paragraph A to C was added to address scalability consideration. Then paragraph 1B, this is the one that talked about CAG and the SMP, was supportive in terms of reintroducing the X10 standard paragraph 2, the reference on other auditor. In the issues paper, paragraph 29 through 31, you will know that there were some changes made to certain paragraph in section 3A. Those paragraphs were made because in the ED, there was a lot of comments that how we address management's view and auditors' views in determining components. People getting a perception that the auditor would take a very radical view in determining components for audit works. That was not, unfortunately, that was not the intention of the task force. So we made some changes to emphasize the involvement of the component auditor. Sometimes component auditors are in the best position to perform risk assessment and audit work at the component level. And also more emphasis on the role of the component auditors play in the group audit engagement. So with that, I hope I summarize the key changes in this section. And Tom, I'm now happy to take comments from the board members.
We're in the scope and applicability section, paragraphs 1 to 6, the requirements A1 to 810. Isabel.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Len, for what you said. And thanks to the task force for the time that you spent trying to deal with the issue that we raised at last board meeting. For the people who may not remember, the issue is very well captured in paragraph 20B of agenda item 5. In fact, it's when a single legal entity has created divisions just for management purpose because they want to follow 2 activities separately. If it's on the same system, same location, same internal control, there's no way, there's no reason why we should consider it as a group. And it means that the barber shop next door or the coffee shop next door may be considered as a group, while it's just a small, simple entity. But in this coffee shop, they sell coffee and they sell tobacco, and they follow 2 activities altogether, so they are a group. And it's totally counterintuitive to think that that kind of entities would qualify for a group and to go into ISA 600 and see if you have to allocate components, while it's very simple and you can work on the full population altogether. So the task force has perfectly understood the issue. When I look at what has been done in 1A and A to B, we are not reaching a solution, because 1A still says that it applies to aggregation of financial information of entities or business units such as branches and divisions. So divisions are still there. And in A to B, we try to explain what are these kind of divisions we refer to. And we have a strange sentence saying that although division may be subject to diverse interpretations, they often have some characteristics. But it's not answering to the question, should I apply 600 when we have divisions or not? And in the middle of this sentence, you have this terrible word, often,
but we have in some other standards. We also have sometimes usually or ordinarily, and it's a scale, and people don't know exactly what it means, if it's very high, if it's average, and it's something on which we are working on in the CUSP working group, because we have a lot of these words, and it's not very easy for the reader to understand. So having said that, when I look at 21 little a and little b in agenda item 5, so the alternative, it perfectly captures what we mean. Absolutely satisfied if we could replace that last sentence of A to B, big A to big B in the standard by 21 little a and little b of agenda item 5, because it perfectly explains the situations where it's considered as a group, because you have different management, different location, different system, and the situations where you don't need to consider to enter into the standard on group audit. I just have a slight modification, 2 lines before the end of 21B. We mentioned that they have a single general ledger. The divisions have a single general ledger for regulatory or management purpose. And I don't think we should use general ledger. I think we should use sub-ledger, because if it's a general ledger, then you have an aggregation. But if it's a sub-ledger, it's all part of the same system. And that's exactly what we mean. So again, many thanks, Len, for the work that has been done by the task force. You perfectly understood the issue. You found the answer. The answer is in 21 little a and little b, and looking forward to see it in the standard, because for the moment, A to B does not answer to the question. Thank you.
So my take on that is, if you use the language in the issues paper, it would be closer to what you were trying to accomplish. Okay, Sachika?
Thank you very much, Tom. And first of all, I would like to say thank you very much, Len and Jasper, for taking time yesterday. It was very, very fruitful for us to think about what the issues are for us and digest your proposal. I have one comment with regard to applicability, and my issue is about branches. I appreciate that paragraph A to B in regard to division, but I believe there are still some concern and confusion with regard to branches as well. So I think clarification is also necessary. I want to raise an example where the entire entity's financial information is managed by a single accounting system, and the entity has several branches which are located in different locations, but in one jurisdiction. And under that situation, the system enables the financial information to be obtained by each of branches for management purpose. And in this case, even if the main office of the entity is preparing the financial statement for the entity, including those branches, will it be in scope of ISA 600? And I think it is not clear from the definition of group financial statement that states aggregation of the financial information of entities or business units such as branches, because aggregation of the financial information can be interpreted differently. So if the case I mentioned is in scope of ISA 600, I think the vast majority of the audits are now in scope of ISA 600, because in many cases, the entity has some type of branches, unless it is very, very small. And I think this clarification is important, not only the perspective of application of ISA 600, but also the issue of applicability of ISA for LCE. And if the case I mentioned is in scope of ISA 600, I think it is critically important that ISA 600 is sufficiently scalable and it does not create unnecessary work. And on this point, I really appreciated that, scalability consideration is mentioned at paragraph A to C, and it says some requirements in this either are not relevant because they are conditional on the involvement of component auditors. And I think there are other scenarios where the requirement does not apply. For example, when the audit procedures are performed centrally and the account balances in the group financial statement are not disaggregated across components for the purpose of planning and performing audit procedures, I think component performance materiality does not have to be determined. I understand that paragraph A to C refers to paragraph A76. However, paragraph A76 states, in such cases, group performance materiality often will be used. And it is a bit unclear as to whether the requirement, I mean paragraph 29 itself, is relevant or not. And I think it would be very helpful for the user if some of the distinct scenarios are clarified as to what requirements are relevant and what are not. I know it may be difficult to be addressed in the standard itself, but can be provided by form guidance such as illustrative example or Q&A. That's all from me for this section. Thank you.
Okay, Fernando.
Thanks, Tom. Len, I have to admit that at the beginning I was very scary when I saw all the colors on the track changes and thought that the papers were really changed significantly. But after taking some time and going through and reading, it actually makes sense. I really enjoy this part of scoping and applicability. I think it reads nicer and at least from my point of view, it's clearer where you are in or you are out. I hear the comments about branches and divisions, and I think circumstances are going to be different depending of the country and the size of the business and the nature of the business and et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be very difficult to come up with a recipe that says, here's always when you're going to be or out. There's got to be some judgment, a little bit of understanding about the transactions, the flow, the revenue streams, and a bunch of things. But what you're presenting actually, I think, is much better. I think it addresses somehow the big concern from Isabel, which was, I guess, also a big concern for me. And I do understand that now it should work much better when you are a group auditor and also the owner of the whole audit. At least from my point of view, it's much better. I was thinking about the option that you presented between having the 2 paragraphs in the issues paper and having just 1 paragraph in the standard. I liked better 1 paragraph. It reads simpler. But I wouldn't really object if there's a need to include the 2 paragraphs, as Isabel was mentioning, to make it even more prominent to the readers. I think it's really just a matter of how detailed we want to go in explaining when you are in or out. But definitely, I think it's going to be impossible to be 100% accurate to decide how the standard is going to be applicable. Again, I still consider that in real life, circumstances are going to be different and some judgment and decisions will need to be made. Thanks.
Thank you, Fernando. Julie.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks, Len, for the hard work you've been doing with the task force. I do want to reiterate my position back when we last talked about this, that I agree with the task force's entry point. I was happy to see that hadn't changed because I'm in agreement with that. So I was happy about that and generally quite happy about what you've done in this section as well. I do have a couple of things just to highlight, and I can send along some other editorial offline comments to you for the task force to consider as well. You asked in the issues paper about preference on A to B, 1 paragraph versus 2. I guess if I had to choose, I would choose the 2 paragraph option. I think that the contrasting example when you're in and when you're out is helpful. I know it's more words, but I did err on the side of thinking that would be helpful. So that would be my preference there. When I got to A to C, this is your scalability paragraph. I wondered if this would be even more helpful as one of the introductory paragraphs and not in the application material. It really does highlight, you know, that this standard encompasses all group audits, and it also highlights the scalability piece. So just a thought maybe to consider whether that paragraph could be promoted, so to speak, to something in the body of the standard as opposed to an AM paragraph. Now moving along, I got a little tripped up when I got to 3B. And 3B is what you've included here, where it starts to talk about the involvement of component auditors and the reference to ISA 220 revised. And where I got tripped up, Len, was it felt a little inconsistent with A2C and A7, because those two application material paragraphs sort of give you some more context for the fact that there might not be component auditors in your group audit. And if there aren't, then the requirements relative to component auditors wouldn't be relevant. But the starting point in 3B talks about the fact that a group audit engagement team has component auditors. So I don't know if it's just worth looking at that again, just to make sure that we haven't included any inconsistency in the way we're describing how that team comes together. I'm in the camp of there may not be component auditors every single time in a group audit. And then I think that was it in that section. And like I said, overall, I was quite happy with your changes there.
Thank you, Julie. Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Len, and thanks to the task force for all the hard work, and again for reaching out to talk to Renee, and I appreciate that. The entry point into the standard has been one of the major areas of concern for us as to whether we're scoping in too much or the lack of clarity around it. I can see all the hard work there in that particular area. Preference here for me is I'm still not a great fan of redefining consolidation process. I do see that as a very procedural approach, and very much keen to try and get back to the principle that what you're trying to do, which I do see somewhat related to aggregation risk. But I've raised the issue before, and what I can see is that you've now made it much clearer that we're redefining the consolidation process. So I think that if you're going to go down that route, I think that is a real step forward. I would encourage, again, the task force to consider more. You have done, but I would consider more, whether you can build in more of the concept, which I see as the principle we're trying to deal with here, which is a form of aggregation risk. I accept that aggregation risk exists in many forms across the audit, but I think there are special considerations for aggregation risk in that particular area. I do like a lot of what you have done with regards to the two paragraphs versus the one paragraph approach. Because this entry point is so important, I'm probably very heavily in favour of the two paragraphs approach. So for the reasons that have been outlined by Isabel, I just think we need a great clarity around this particular area. So I think that would again even aid the clarity. I'm not big on adding additional words, but I think they are beneficial words. Concern around scalability being the paragraph on scalability, and it's again both the fact that we need it, although this is a scalable, and the placement. So if we do need it, where it's best placed, and we need to get a consistency approach. I'm probably with Julie there as to whether it is best placed back in application material, or it can be more consistently placed for those standards where we're deemed to need it. But again, the test there is as to whether we need it or whether we achieve a scalability in other ways. But I can see all the hard work done here. I think a big step forward, going in the right direction, and I think consideration of the comments that you've received. But appreciate very much the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Thanks, Len and the team. This is such a difficult area, and as others have said, this is it's really important. We've sent a number of comments offline. A lot of those are drawing on some of the practical challenges that are being faced day to day. I like others, I feel that there's progress here, but we still have questions around particularly divisions and where some of the lines are drawn. So I think there's probably still some work to do there. But as I said, I feel we're moving in the right direction. On your question about the options in the paper, personally, I didn't have a strong preference, but I do feel, as others have said, it is so important that that on balance, I would probably go for 2. But as I say, no strong preference. But thank you very much.
Okay. Taylor.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Len, and the task force for all the work you have done. I have one comment to the first question in relation to the application material in paragraph A to B in agenda item 5A. I believe that the application material could be expanded to contrast the situation in which proposed ISA 600 revised would apply versus when it would not apply, as suggested in paragraph 21 of this issues paper. I find this contrast of situations to be clearer to practitioners and regulators compared to the current paragraph in A to B, and therefore I believe it would be in the public interest to replace A to B with the 2 paragraphs. In particular, practitioners I have consulted have conveyed to me that it is important that the need for a consolidation process be used as a criterion as to whether ISA 600 applies. I have a further comment. I support the views of the task force as set forth in section 1 of the issues paper for the other matters addressed in that section. In particular, the attention of the task force to deal with using audit evidence obtained from audits of financial statements performed for other purpose, which, given the importance of statutory audits in Europe, is a very important issue that needs to be addressed. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Chun-Wei?
Thank you, Tom, and a very good morning from Singapore. And thank you, Len, for the introductory comments, and to you and the task force and staff for the great work done. I find the issue paper really, really well written, very convincing, and I find myself agreeing to many, many different things. And the draft, the edits that have been put through, very high quality as well. So congratulations and well done. I, like others, were reading the parts on the scope and applicability, and I think a lot of progress has been made, and it's definitely an improvement. But also, like some of the others, I still find that line sort of a little bit vague. And when I was listening to Sachiko, for example, I was smiling very widely because she was like articulating everything that I wanted to say, but obviously in a much clearer way. So if you are having a transcript, if you can just copy and paste what she said and put it under my name as well to just double up that support, that would be great. So in my mind, and I was just casting my mind back to when I was in practice and I was doing branches at retail, and where they have many different branches, we were doing the audit ourselves. We were not using group audit because to our mind, it wasn't a group audit. And then while between the different branches, there were inter-branches balances and transaction elimination, etc., etc. that really wasn't. So, and I was also doing a branch of overseas company, and that was a group audit. So I think there will be a little bit of confusion as to what exactly is the work effort, and I think what you have in A2C can potentially be expanded and become a lot more helpful, because I was just extracting the entire requirement so that, to my mind, it's easier to read again. And then I was just going through, and where no component auditors are involved, actually, what is exactly is the difference between the work effort, right? In here, vis-a-vis, you don't apply 600. And I think that clarity can be further enhanced. And I think people will really appreciate it, because number one is the entry point. And then even if you do get into 600, what exactly is that difference? I think, I think what Sachiko has suggested and what some others have suggested as well, that will be really helpful. And just maybe stepping back a little bit in terms of A to B vis-a-vis what you have in the issue paper 21A and B, my strong preference is for the one in the issue paper, actually. Yeah, thanks, Len.
Thank you. There seems to be, as we have 3 more hands go up. One thing to think about, I get the sense that people want more clarity about the in and out, but it seems to me there runs a slight risk here of having a very rules-based standard, considering when you think of the different corporate forms and laws and regulations. So I think it's something we'll have to balance, and the task force will need to consider about where the line is. Right now, there seems to certainly be strength of opinion towards 2 paragraphs, but maybe I'm overreading it right now. But on the issue of the guidance, but interested to see what the next 3 commentators say. Kai?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Len, for the introduction to the discussion here. I think similar to what others have mentioned as well, I like the direction of the papers. As the introduction point here is crucial to knowing if you're in or out, being clear on the intention. And as Sachiko explained, the not knowing if you're in and out, and I think balancing that with the Tom's view on or Tom's words now on the direction to be rules-based. I don't want this to be rules-based, but I think the intention of if you're in or out needs to be clear. So maybe maybe we do need to add some more there. As others have said, I also, not that it's 2 paragraphs, but the content of the 2-paragraph application material I like better than the one that I like better, and then the one that's in the standard now. And similar views to Julie and Roger, the A2C, I think, is better placed in the intro section rather than in the application material. I think that is also consistent with some of the changes that we've done in recent standards. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kai. Imran?
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I'm still euphoric about the approval of the EER guidance. We've been telling everyone about it in South Africa today, so congratulations to Len, and congratulations to you, Tom, on another successful project as chair, and congratulations to you, Willie, and the team on another successful project. ISA 600 is going to be with us for a while still, and so I approached the review of this paper really from the perspective of how responsive has it been to what we've heard in the comment letters and what new proposals have come up. And what I have found is that as it is a currently work in progress, the challenge of the heavy editing in the document really confused me. I'd like to see the complete picture. I appreciate its work in progress, and that we may have to wait a while before we see how it all fits together, and able to understand the reasons for every one of the changes. I heard in Len's introduction now that there is no major deviation, that we're really just dealing with geography. And I would respond to that by saying, is that enough in respect of what respondents to the ED said to us? If the entire process is about changing geography, which maybe is an understatement on Len's part, I'm sure the work is much more than just geography. It certainly is more than that, and that's a message I'd want to communicate. I'd also like to pick up on Isabel's comments and Isabel's reflection always about this coffee shop in Paris. As an aside, I hope that when we go to Paris on the approval of the LCE standards, she'll take us all to that coffee shop to have the coffee and the tobacco. But I thought that this draft had resolved Isabel's concern. So in my reading of it, I thought it was fixed. And like many issues, it's so easy to understand how, without seeing it from the other person's perspective, one can arrive at the wrong conclusion. And so I was glad that Isabel raised it again today and that it remains a concern, and I understand why. And so in respect of the options, I believe that the 2-paragraph solution, if Isabel thinks it will get us there, is certainly more helpful and closes that gap. I'd like to raise an issue that I don't think has been raised before within this set of paragraphs, and that's in relation to this newly introduced paragraph 3A and the use of the word flexibility in 3A. So the very last sentence somewhere in what is now a very long paragraph, if you look at it with all of the edits, it says that the ISA provides flexibility for the group auditor. And the concept of flexibility for someone who works within a regulator is a red flag, because flexibility is a word that goes well beyond judgment. And so when you put it into the environment of regulation, you ask yourself, how's that going to work? So I did what I would normally do, is go back to the ISAs and let's reflect on where we have used flexibility before in the ISAs. And I may be wrong, but I think we only use it in 2 places, specifically in only 2 places. We use it in relation to an engagement letter where law and regulation may dictate the content of an engagement letter. Very much understand that. And we use it in terms of one other area which just slipped my mind now, but I think it's got to do with some jurisdictional needs in relation to reporting. That there's some flexibility in relation to that. But I don't see examples of flexibility being used in relation to what is essentially here an audited judgment matter on the selection of components. My concern is how will this flexibility applied and what then will be the guardrails around it? Because what the practitioner will have in every instance is say, well, I chose this and the standard tells me I can do it in this way. I'm just applying the flexibility, and flexibility is how long is this piece of elastic. So of course, one of those things is that in the responsible hands, flexibility will be used to entrench audit quality. In irresponsible hands, flexibility can be used to advance commercial considerations and other things. And I think that we will need to either reconsider that word or provide the guardrails within which that can be used for purposes of the selection and what's being described over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Isabel, you wanted to come in again?
Yes, thank you, and thanks to everybody. Really happy that we share the same understanding of what has been proposed in 21 A and B, and that we all agree that it conveys the right message. But listening to Julie, it reminded me I wanted to raise something on 3B, exactly the same thing as that she raised. And it's also for me the opportunity, maybe for the last time, because I think I already tried several times, to raise something to the board and share my thoughts with you. So if you look at 3B, second sentence, it is written, because the engagement team for a group audit includes component auditor, this ISA requires, and so on. And so we have a kind of statement that when you do a group audit, you have component auditor. This is not my understanding of the standard as it is already right now, and as we are drafting it for the future. But that's the paradox of this ISA 600 on group audit, because we have to look back at history and remind ourselves where it comes from. And I remind it quite clearly because when you become a CPA in France, you have to write a thesis. And my thesis was on group audit. So at that time, it was ISA number 5. And it was using the work of other auditors. And that was the title. And over time, it became, at the time of clarity, group audit. But it's still in the 600 series. And if you look at the subtitles, the chapters among the ISA handbook, 600 series is using the work of others. And you have using the work of the expert, you have using the work of internal audit, and ISA 600 was standing there because it was using the work of other auditors. So I think, first thing, that the second sentence of 3B is wrong, and we should not start by because, but by when. And my second point to the board is there an opportunity, as we are reopening this standard, and we will not reopen it maybe over the next 10 years, to change the positioning of this standard and include it somewhere else? Because for me, it's not only using the work of others. Thank you.
Okay. Carol.
Thank you, Tom. I wanted to intervene at this point because I do not envy the board in its deliberations on a topic as complex as group audit. Because group audit means that you have to try to identify what is a group. Now, I had the privilege of having to deal with that many, many times, and we are now in Europe again discussing the concept of group supervision. And one lesson I've learned from that is that because of the distinction between legal structures and economic reality, it is very difficult to very specifically define what is a group. So my advice here would be, it is important to try to identify as clearly as possible the scope of this standard, but be careful not to be so precise that you overlook the many economic realities in which groups appear throughout the world. And I'm a little bit concerned when I read in the agenda paper 5, paragraph 23, that professional judgment should not be an option. In the end, professional judgment should play a role, because what you're trying to achieve in this standard is an economic risk-based approach. An economic reality should be a guidance in deciding whether or not this standard should apply.
Carol, you sort of touch on some of the points that I was highlighting and the tensions. So here, my read of the board was largely supportive of the direction of the task force, not saying unanimously in support of the task force, but almost overwhelmingly in support of the direction of this task force. A need for help with clarification of where to draw the line, which I'm certain the task force will need to grapple with as in the coming weeks and months. Certainly a preference towards the 2 paragraphs where it was asked the question, and some warnings. Imran raised a number of concerns from his perspective. I raised the concern that there's a risk of being overly prescriptive and actually unintentionally locking people out rather than locking people in. And so we have to consider that as well. I turn it back to you, Len, to respond, and then we'll take a break after your response, and then we'll go to the next sections.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you to all the board members for your input. Very helpful, and thank you for that clear direction in terms of your preference on the 2-paragraph approach outlined in paragraph 21 of the agenda paper. So let me just touch on some of the things I've heard. Isabel, thank you very much. I know you had to work with us before the meeting, to get that language right in paragraph 21, as well as giving your initial feedback. So very helpful in telling us we perfectly understand your situation, and we try to address it. Thank you. And there were a number of comments about perhaps elevating the paragraph A to C. Julie mentioned it, and others as well. So we'll take a look that suggestion. And also thank you, Julie, about your suggestion to look at some of the inconsistency between the paragraphs you noted. But I want to go back to what Carl has said, also Fernando said, also Aaron said, that this flexibility, professional judgment, this is one area that we have spent a lot of time, and it's not an easy issue to resolve. And Carl, you're right. Paragraph 23. From some of the comments we heard, especially from practitioners, saying we need a clearer guidance. So we took that approach. But I guess when we talk about clearer guidance, brighter line guidance, it's also a matter of interpretation. Depends which side of the fence you're on. We try to have brighter line, but also there's some room for judgment. I think Fernando, you explained that very well in terms of there still needs to be some professional judgment involved. And this standard clearly needs, focus on stand for the challenge of time, because if you write something too prescriptive, and you might scope out a lot of other situations as well. So the difficulty and challenges try to find a balance. So we'll take it back to task force and think about some of the area we heard on the scalability and the entry point. Another thing, maybe I just focused on Sashiko and Chingwei's comments about branches, and this is nothing new. This is in the X10 600. And a lot of feedback from practitioners and in the ED process that 600 is used for in a multi-location type of audit. For example, banks, gas or petrol station, convenience retail stores, and some type of consolidation process, aggregation process of financial information. Hearing your comments, maybe we can think about and look at what we had in X10 600, also perhaps some examples we can consider, but I want to make sure the task force has an opportunity to digest your suggestions. And Isabel, thank you to bring that issue about the evolution of ISO 600. That's the underlying challenge for this standards. The evolution has always been the use of work of other auditor, and he went through 3 exposure draft 10 years ago to become a group audit statement. So that was a painful process, and many of you may not had the opportunity to participate in that process. I mean, my task force member Josephine Wolf and Susan's being on that journey, 10, 12 years ago. And I was sitting in the back alley as an IAASB observer and putting my head in the process. So appreciate you bring that up, and that's why I want to focus on Enron's focus on flexibility. I think we have to be focused on we're looking at ISO 3215 using that risk-based approach. There's going to be a lot of work needs to be done when you apply 315 and then determine your component. And also important to know that It's what work needs to be done at one location by who. So it's all important to bring that into that mix. So there's all the moving parts. So it has to be some flexibility. I understand regulatory's concern, and luckily we do have Josephine as a regulator in our task force to provide the input from regulatory perspective. I'm not going to address all the comments, but many of the comments have similar thing, and I really appreciate. But before we go to break, maybe I just want to see if Jasper and Dan, do you have any reflection based on what you heard so far?
Thank you, Len. I don't have any additional reflections. I think the points you raised are the ones that I would also raise. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Len, and nothing else from me. I think the comments and the input were clear from the board, and the task force can have the further discussions on that basis.
Okay, thank you, Dan, Jasper, and Tom. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, we're gonna break. I just leave us with one parting shot. I do get concerned with calls for detailed application material and guidance, because the more precision you get, when you leave something out, it creates unintended consequences. So we should really just at least keep that in our back of our mind. I know people want guidance and clarity, but this is the challenge that a standard setter faces when it's principle based. Really good discussion. I think we'll break right now at 6:52 p.m. my time. We'll come back 2 minutes after the hour and try to get through at least 3 more sections of the document for today. See you shortly. We could start reconvening. Give me one more sec. Okay, Len, do you want to move to the second section?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Before we start the second session, maybe just want to make sure I've heard from all the board members. We heard from most of the board members, but just in case that other board member may not have the chance to reflect to that first section, and also happy to take comments offline as well. One other thing, I want to make sure I address the public members' comment. I think Kyle Wu, you mentioned about in Europe and in a number of jurisdictions continue to be interest or looking for guidance on how group audits work with statutory audit and or audits for other purposes. Although we, the ISO 600 is very much focused on the performance of a group audit from a group financial perspective, from a group auditor's responsibility in taking overall responsibility in managing the quality of group audit. We do know a number of commenters raised that questions, and also this is one of the public interest comments that was raised to us. So the task force will need to address that, but it's just that we not discussing that at this meeting, or bring it back to probably in the June meeting in terms of how we address that, with the focus still very much focused on group audit, but clearly there's some practice issues that involving component auditor who perform both component audits and for group auditor, also for other purposes. So, but this is a public interest member comments. I want to make sure I address that and put on the record. Thank you, Kyle Wu. So, Michelle, let's move one slide over to the next part on definitions. Again, I take it that all the board members have read the issues paper, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the changes. I'm sorry, move back one slide. So we made changes on component group auditor. We talked about it in the December meeting, changing from a group engagement team to group auditor, and a lot of comments in the December discussion about linking the group financial statement definition in 9K with what we had in the ED paragraph 11 and A16A to describe about the concept of a consolidation process is different from in the financial reporting framework describing consolidated financial statements. So those are the major changes in the section. Paragraph 9, also the related application material A12 and A16 and A16B. So with that, turn it back to you, Tom, for comments.
Definitions. Okay. 9B, 9K of the standard, and A12, A16 to A16B. Julie?
Thanks, Tom. And Len, my comment relates to 9H. So I think that with the change made there, the consequence is that you now have a definition for group auditor that doesn't include component auditors, if I'm understanding right. So if it doesn't include component auditors, because I don't think that the component auditors can do little 1, little 2, or little 3, does that need to be clear in the lead-in or in the definition? I'm adding in words something to the fact of the group engagement partner or other members of the engagement team bracket, except for component auditors, or something to that effect need to be added, because I think one could read that as it is right now, and also read paragraph 6 that talks about how assignments could be made to component auditors for certain tasks without really understanding that that definition excludes component auditors because they can't be responsible for the items in that definition. So that on those paragraphs, Tom, that's all I had.
Thank you. Imran?
Since we have been asked, I thought I'd like to share my support here for paragraph 9K, the new definition, and also to call out paragraph 11 and the enhancements made there, which I thought were good. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Imran. Roger?
Yeah, consistent with my theme from before, I like what you've done here. I like the extension to aggregation risk, Len. I like the extensions to 9K. In 9K, you basically have outlined aggregation of the financial. So you've actually got a link there, a potential link there back into aggregation risk. And I would encourage you to see if you can explore a little bit more of the principles on aggregation risk and building that link from 9K back into it as well, or just highlighting that as the sort of a principle that we're trying to get to in that particular line. A16A is a little bit of a repeat, and I'm not necessarily in favour of repeats, but because of and it depends on where we go, but because of the consolidation process and the definition is so important, it is an area I could live with in this particular regard. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Anyone else? Okay, Len, back to you.
Okay. Thank you, and Julie, thank you for your comments. We'll take your suggestion and have a discussion at the task force to see we can take your suggestions on board. And also, Roger, your suggestions about aggregation, we'll take that back to the task force. And Aaron, thank you very much for your support on the revised definition. Appreciate that support. It's very important. Okay, so I guess most of the people are pretty happy. So I take that. Other than the comments that has been raised, we can move forward to the next section. So Michelle, thank you for the slides display. So this is the area that the task force spend most of the time in our 7 separate conference calls meeting. In the last 3 months. So I understand that most of the board members have read the issues paper, but probably also helpful for me to just walk through in terms of some of the thinking behind some of the changes. So based on the comments from the ED 600, also your input in the December meeting. So it became clear that what we're lacking in the ED 600 is a clear framework on how to apply the risk-based approach, especially in relationship to what needs to be done and who should do the work. So, so the task force spent a lot of time and discussing what's a right approach to address the comments. So our suggestion and the recommended plan is we're adding a new paragraph 17A that highlights the special considerations in the group audit situation in relation to develop an overall group audit strategy. From that group audit strategy, so hopefully that with all the application materials you're going to you have read in the A33 section to help you identify what needs to be done and who should do the work. Also, the task force spent a lot of time just in our discussion. We acknowledge that the planning and performing group audit is not a linear process, right? So it's actually an iterative session, so a process. So we in 17A also the subsequent related discussions we add a lot of material in the A33 section to highlight and emphasize on the iterative nature of the risk-based approach in performing group audit. So, so 17A, a new requirement, and in the application material to paragraph 17A, we further explain the special considerations. For example, just to highlight some of the key changes. On paragraph 833A to 833D, we include general information about how the overall group audit strategy fits into the continual iterative nature of planning and performing a group audit. Paragraph 33E, we included matters that may influence group auditors' determination of components at which audit work needs to be done, also performed, including the nature and the amount of assets, liability, and transaction at the location and business unit. So this paragraph essentially tried to address, we're taking away the significant component concept. And this is related back my earlier comments about the IAASB comments on significant component and how we address that. Then in paragraph 33F to 33J, we include guidance on the resource needed to perform group audit engagement. Particularly in paragraph 33F sets out the factors might influence group auditors' determination about whether to involve component auditors. So hopefully what we propose in terms of that new requirement 17A, introduction of requiring the group auditor to develop a group audit strategy, and further help in terms of practitioner, in terms of dealing with that risk assessment piece in terms of determining where to do the work and who should do the work, and some of the guidance building to help the practitioners to go through that process, that iterative nature of the group audits. So with that, as I said, I take it that the board member have read the issues paper on those specific paragraphs. And this is one section we do need a clear direction from the board in terms of what we propose, and also to ensure that the direction is correct and we're on the right track. Again, we're happy to take any editorial suggestions offline, but the focus is on making sure that framework we propose to the board for consideration is on point. So with that, I'll turn back to you, Tom.
Okay, group audit strategy, quite a bit in terms of new language here. Any comments? Diane.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everybody. Since this is my first time speaking on the subject, I just want to make a couple overall comments, and then I'll address the specific section. First of all, this is another good topic, group audits. This is a tough one. I think if you were to put 10 people in a room with 10 different group structures, you're going to get very different views on how to approach it and how to attack it. It's a difficult one. So I think what you've pulled together here, Len and your team, have done a great job overall, and we're quite pleased with the direction of much of it. I also want to reflect on just a couple comments that were made, because I thought they were really outstanding and quite aligned to the way I was looking at this. I think Imran's point about words, I made this comment yesterday that words matter, and I think the words of flexibility versus judgment. In my mind, group audits and coming up with your group audit strategy and executing your group risk assessment is really linked to judgment. It's what you thought about, what you considered, and the other word that I would put behind that is documentation. I think I would encourage you, Lynn, to think about where you want to emphasize documentation so that it's clear when somebody picks up work papers or somebody is trying to understand the approach that the auditor took. What was the auditor thinking, and what evaluation process did they go through? What did they consider? What did they consider but maybe didn't, it affected their strategy? So I think documentation is really important. I think group audits is a bit of an art, but I would not say it is a, you know, this is a pretty controlled piece of art. This is not a crazy piece of artwork. So I think there is important to give some structure to this. I also would encourage you on the application material. I think you've got a great opportunity here to put in some examples. I think examples, again, when it comes to group audit, are going to really help the practitioner understand what this means and how to compare and contrast it to what they're seeing. So I would encourage you also, either through outreach or other methods, to just think about how you can provide good, robust examples. We do have some editorial comments that we'll send along, but relative to this section, I did want to just call out a couple. First of all, we really like the fact, I like the fact that you've got the specific section dedicated to the group audit strategy. I think that raises the importance of it. It is an important part of the audit process, so I think that was right on to do that. When you get into A33, there's a couple places just as suggestions that I'd like to just talk about. Underneath A33D, where you talk about unexpected events or changes in conditions that may cause the auditor to come back and rethink about their approach, this would be a great place to put some examples in. Maybe things have changed because there's a business acquisition, so the makeup of the group has changed, or there's been an actual change in the operation of one of the components, new business, or they're exiting a business. But I think here would be a great place to provide some examples for the practitioner. In terms of 33E, A33E, the second level of bullets, where you start talking about the nature of events or conditions associated with the component and talk about newly formed or acquired businesses, I think those are very good points to bring out. I would put a little bit of a brush over those in terms of their significance. And I know we're treading lightly in significance, and I do agree with that, so that it doesn't become very mechanical and there's no judgment involved anymore. But I do think when you start thinking about these characteristics that you've called out, that characteristic by itself, if it were to happen in a very, very insignificant component within the organization, may not cause you to then bring attention to it and really make that a focus of your audit. So I would just ask you to think about, is there a little bit of an element that would sit with those to say, how does it view in terms of significance, either individually or again in an aggregation concept. But overall, quite happy with this section and the overall direction of the paper. Thank you, Len.
Thank you. Sue?
Thank you. Thanks, Len. I think broadly okay with the direction of where this is going, with the caveat perhaps that as you've already identified, you haven't addressed the considerations around where there's a local statutory audit. And I think in the comments we've sent you offline, there's quite a number of areas here where I think that's relevant and important. Particularly, for example, if the local auditor isn't appointed by the group auditor, if the timing of work is different, for example, because there's a different year end. So some of the kind of timeline and the process work doesn't quite flow through there. So as I say, I know you're going to be looking at that, but I would encourage you to do that. And one specific area is we talk about the wording of involving a statutory auditor or local statutory auditor. The previous wording of being able to use the work of that auditor maybe sort of felt a bit more comfortable given some of these timeline considerations that you haven't yet had a chance to work through. I think the other thing to perhaps raise in this section is a number of comments we've raised about the thinking seems to be focused on the location of work. As we're all demonstrating, the location to some extent is not as relevant these days. It's more about how centralized the records are and the access to information. So the physical location of either the records or the component auditor may be less relevant. But as I say, there's a lot of good material here in direction, but I think that piece around local statutory audits is still to be picked up. Thanks.
Thank you. Julie?
Thanks, Tom. And Len, I was happy to see this section, but because this is largely new content, I do have a few thoughts on it, so bear with me. In 17A, I see the direction of the task force and I'm in agreement with it. I was wondering why the requirement doesn't also refer to the group audit plan. It only refers to the group audit strategy and not the group audit strategy and plan. And I went back to 300 to try to figure out if little 17A, little a, or little b both fit into strategy, or if either one of them fit into plan. And I kind of came to the conclusion that little a might fit into plan, like a planning item as opposed to a strategy item. And I know that's a distinction that we draw out in 300. So just maybe take a look at that. Maybe it is more just the group audit strategy and plan, because I think what you've got in the other materials covers planning items as well. And then this was probably one area, Len, where I thought maybe we had too many application material paragraphs, to be honest. When I got to A33C, that was really good because that talked about the purpose and the process for establishing the strategy. But I wondered if we really needed A33, big A and big B, because they were largely just repeating things that were in 300 and 315. And then I think where I got to the real meat of the application material is A33, big E and F, because that really was in my mind where you were setting out your framework to respond to the feedback you got that the risk-based approach is all great, but we don't know how to apply the framework to it. And so it felt like A33, E and F got a little lost by their positioning in the application material. So I guess my suggestion was just to maybe reconsider some of those introductory application material paragraphs, and if there's any way to skinny it down a little bit so that the really important paragraphs that I guess that I thought of kind of rose further up to the top in the application material. And then when I got into, I have some other comments I'll send along the way, but particularly when I got down to, sorry, I'm scrolling here. A33J, I think this ties to my earlier comment about how we've now defined group auditor. And if we've defined group auditor the way we have, would that definition and this paragraph conflict in a way that the group auditor might not be able to use a component auditor as a key member in planning the audit? And so maybe just take a look at that and make sure that, as I said, it aligns to my other comment around the definition of group auditor, but just making sure that we haven't inadvertently scoped out the option to have a component auditor play a key role in the planning. But as I said, I have some other comments I'll pass along offline.
Thank you, Julie. Isabel?
Yes, thank you. On this section, as it's new, we try to understand, and there's always the language barrier when you're not native. So sometimes we struggled with words, and I will just raise a few issues. One of them is the fact that we put a lot of emphasis on the audit work. It's in the title, it's in the requirement. The components at which audit work will be performed. And we find this concept in many places. But sometimes we also refer to work, and sometimes we seem to use as an equivalent further audit procedures and audit work. So maybe there's some consistency to find using this audit work expression. Then when in A33E, we struggled in understanding two bullets. So again, sorry for my poor English. We tried to understand the first bullet, the disaggregation of significant classes of transaction. And as I understand that disaggregation has several meanings. It can mean allocation, breakdown, and so do we have to disaggregate something, or is it already disaggregated? what do we mean by this expression of disaggregation? And I wanted to raise it because several people around the table understood something differently. And same thing with the last bullet of A33E, the effectiveness of the control environment. So there was a debate to determine whether it was effectiveness or efficiency and if it was the right word, and then what effectiveness really meant here, and what do we have to do to assess the effectiveness of the control environment. So I don't know if it's a choice of words or if we can clarify that, because really several people had very different understanding of these two bullets. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Imran?
Sure, thank you very much. In respect of these sections, really perhaps 2 or 3 batches of comments. I think Isabel's introduction around there were a lot of changes, and so battling to understand why we made some of the changes and where they are coming from. With that said, I think that I was unable to reconcile whether the addition we've made to 17A equals the deletion we've made in paragraph 13. Because what we had in paragraph 13 related specifically to acceptance, and what is happening in the new paragraph 17A is about the development of the group strategy. I would imagine that there is no strategy at the time of acceptance, and so wasn't sure why we had the deletion in 13. Maybe this is a point where I can highlight an approach other task forces have taken, where we do this side-by-side requirements and application material, but we have yet another column which explains the why. And the explanation of the why may make tracking these changes just a little bit easier. In respect of 17A, though, I want to say that I'm fully supportive of what it is, of the idea and what it's aiming to do. But I'd like to dig into the application material just a little bit, please. In respect of A33A, which describes what needs to happen on initial engagement, I think it's fair to say that what the application material describes simply won't be enough. It almost relies entirely on what others have done and management has said, and particularly the last sentence of A33A, that would need to be expanded quite considerably in relation to initial group audit engagement. I don't believe any engagement can be planned on the basis of what that last sentence describes as being the inputs to the engagement. In respect of A33E, which has the subheading components at which auditors perform work, Len, you'll recognize this comment as being something that goes all the way back to the original project proposal. I don't believe that the decision on which components get selected is one that remains a mechanical one in firms. I don't believe any engagement partner will look at the bullets in A33E and on the basis of that make the determination. What I'm referring here to, Len, is one that is a point I've raised repeatedly at our board, that human behavior plays a part in the determination of components, and commercial considerations play a part in the determination of components. Because there is a bucket of money to be divvied up, a set of fees to be distributed within the group, and there are things like how much of time do we have, where are the resources, and all of those things get overlaid the mechanical issues that we've described in A33. So yes, we correctly focus on the mechanics, but if we don't focus on the human behavior and commercial interests, then we're not going to be able to accurately reflect in the standard genuinely how these things are determined. Whether we choose to document it that way or not, we know that that's the human behavior that drives these things. So, and in doing so, the kinds of messages that are necessary are the ones around being wary of bias, the familiarity bias. Pick that component because you went there before. Pick that component because it's cheap to do, or the timing is convenient, or choose it because it's easy, and that kind of thing. And that kinds of stuff is what ruins the audit. It's because they never went there all those years, the management they knew, or they're never going to come. They applied this commercial logic to the selection of the components, and the audit fails, as opposed to applying recognizing their biases and weaknesses in selection of components and taking all of that together into consideration. I think that's a crucial part of the framework that I hope you will develop further in relation to what you've now introduced in A17A. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran. Len or team, we're about halfway through. A lot of people had their hands up on this. I think so. If you feel the need to jump in, please do right now. Otherwise, I'll go on.
Let me just address a few comments. And Sue, thank you. I saw the comments you sending earlier today, and that, as I described, we'll give attention to the statutory audit and how that works with a group audit situation. Enough attention in our upcoming task force meeting, try to address that. Appreciate those comments sending in, and also your comments about it's not about words but access to information. We'll take a look. And Julie, thank you for the helpful suggestions you have in a number of paragraphs in A33 series, and also that earlier comments about the working with the definition. We'll go back and take a look. And Isabel, the wording, audit work and audit procedure. So this is one that I think the comments I made in the audit evidence one. When we describe audit procedure in ISO 220, we refer to in the X10 the current ISO 500 that seem to focus on procedure obtaining evidence. So audit work is risk assessment, planning, or other work in addition to audit procedure. But with the projects on audit evidence, try to define audit procedure. Maybe we'll work with the audit evidence task force. And taking your comments on the disaggregation, we'll take that back and take a look. And your point about effectiveness, control environment, we have two members from the ISO 315 task force. I'll go back and check with them to make sure everything we've done in that area is actually to try to align with the languages in ISO 315. And Diane, appreciate your support and also your encouragement to provide additional example. This is something that we need to balance in terms of the length of the standards and providing helpful example to the practitioners. At least the task force has talked about perhaps some of the examples can be addressed through implementation material, non-authoritative staff guidance. So we'll go back and consider your suggestions and all those helpful comments about A33D and A33E, and particularly on the points on significance. Enron, so the commercial consideration comments, I think you reached out to me 2 years ago when I became the task force chair. So I remember that clearly, you keep focusing on perhaps because of fee arrangement, the auditors will influence the auditor in choosing where to do the work. I think that concept of fee influencing auditor, it's not just a group audit issue. I think it's a broader issue. Maybe it's actually in the ethical code. We talk about exercise professional due care. ISO 600 is very much focused on audit risk and managing quality from a group perspective. But I do take your note from from your role as an audit inspector, audit regulator. Fee maybe is a factor impacting audit quality. But we had as a task force talk about it during the exposure process. We're not sure how to bring that into a technical auditing standards. You mentioned, A33E focus on some the technical mechanical approach. So we're taking another look, but actually have a log every time you bring the commercial consideration to me since 2 years ago. So it's not forgotten. It's just it's a difficult issue to address. Whether that should be addressed in 600 or should be addressed elsewhere. Tom, I'm not going to address all other comments, but those are ones I thought I provide feedback. But lastly, sorry, everyone, since you are a non-practitioner regulator, it's important to talk about the paragraph 13 you referred to about deletion. I think in the issues paper, we highlighted that we delete that because the response from the board member in the last meeting that in the acceptance and continuous stage, it's too early to make a determination about where to involve the component auditor. So that's why the deletion was made. Decision to involve component auditor later in the process in the planning and the strategy stage. So that's why the reason for the deletion 13. With that, Tom, I'll turn it back to you and to get more comments from the board.
Okay. About halfway through this round. The only thing I was thinking about the commercial interest too is like, remember that 600 doesn't what's an important point, doesn't live in isolation and lives within the context of all that we've done on 315, ISQM1, ISQM2, ISO 220, and our commitment to the IAASB's code of ethics too. So, it's an important point. I think the task force should continue to think about it, but also we have other means in other areas which try to address this issue as well. I have to call on Lynn next, and then Imran, I see you. I assume it's almost like a two-handed intervention that you want to make. So, but I need to call on Lynn next, and then Imran, I'll come back to you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I've just got one back comment to make because I haven't spoken so far. Can I thank the team? I really like Group Auditor. It has changed my whole reading of this document. It's just so much easier. So thank you for that. I also like 17A being added as a I think audit strategy is absolutely vital for group audits. In terms of the application material, though, like others have said, I did get lost in it. There's so much of it and there's so much cross-referencing as well. And others have been more helpful in streamlining comments, but I do think it does need some streamlining and some of the detail lost. In terms of 17A little b, and it also refers to paragraph 21, one of the hardest things in a group audit is actually being able to assess the competency and capability of your components. And I was looking for some application guidance about that, and A33G didn't help me. So I'd like to see more guidance in that particular application material in that particular area, which I know conflicts with cutting down the detail, but I do think that is a very challenging area. And the further away you get from the centre of the group, the harder it gets. So thank you very much for letting me speak, Tom, out of order. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Imran.
Thank you so much. Lynn, I appreciate you undertaking to give this some consideration. To help with your thoughts around it, we're thinking about the determination of components. And the word I'm looking for is bias. And bias is well within the scope of the type of language our board uses throughout the standards. It's the language we use when we're talking about professional skepticism. And so that's the the anchor around which this can be built. And I guess, Tom, what the point I'm making is that actually this is quite relevant in a group situation. And that's why it falls within what we describe as special considerations related to a group, because this is the only place, bar the areas where we may use an expert, where the engagement partner has to divvy up the fee and dish out portions of the audit. And that's why bias and commercial consideration could play a part in it. Thanks. That's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you for that context. Imran, I know that the task force has heard you and will consider it. Chun-Wei?
Thank you, Tom. I'll start by saying that I really support 17A and all the related application material, the A33 series. Really like them, and acknowledging all the comments made by colleagues before me that are all well worth considering in terms of enhancing them. But overall, I'm really happy with it. My comment is on 13, and this is, I guess, a similar comment to Imran. I heard Len's reflection, and I read the issue paper. I know that we discussed, and this is considered an early stage. But just reflecting on it, and I know that we have materials from A21 to A24 that helps us think about that ability to perform necessary work on components and so on. But access issue is often a really critical part of the consideration in terms of acceptance and continuance. And therefore, I wonder if we could reconsider the deletion, because I think it is actually a very important part of that whole process. So that would be my comment. And also just on the application material, I know it's in gray, but looking at A24, I thought it fit really well if we move it to before A22, because it actually follows on to the last bullet point on A21. So something for us to also consider, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Kaiue.
Thanks, Tom. I have a comment. I'm in favor of the task force proposed revisions on the risk-based approach and believe them to be in the public interest because they clarify the iterative nature of the audit process on group audits. However, I believe that the application of the risk-based approach can be further improved in the following respects. Firstly, in addition to the second bullet point in paragraph A33E, paragraph A33E should have another bullet point to also refer to quantitative inherent risk factors, such as the quantitative significance of the classes of transaction, account balances and disclosures of component financial information to the group financial statements. Secondly, in the third bullet point of paragraph A33F, the example should be expanded beyond jurisdictional excess issues to include excess issues resulting for other situations, such as access to work done by auditors of components consolidated using the equity method. Thirdly, in line with paragraph 3B, another bullet point should be added to paragraph A33F to explain that another factor that may cause group auditors to consider the involvement of component auditors would be that component auditors may have greater experience and a more in-depth knowledge of the components and their environments, including local laws and regulations, business practices, language and culture, than the group auditor. That's all. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Kai. Wendy?
Thank you, Tom. And since this is the first time I'm speaking, Len, this is a really tough area. I applaud what you've done. I thought the issues paper was great. Really took me through how we were responding to the comments that were received. And I watch on a daily basis how auditors struggle with existing group audit guidance. So I also looking for the right balance, and different from LCE, where I think we have to be very precise on what's in and what's out. Here, I think we have to be very principled based. And I believe we need to rely a lot on implementation material. So I'm not even so this goes to some of my comments in this section. I like 13, what we did. I like 17A. I like A40 and A40A. I got lost in the application material, and many of the comments that were already made. I tried to tie back the application material to 17A and B. I was not very successful. There were some that I thought could go in other places, and I'm not looking for more there. I'm actually looking for less, and I think that the examples potentially could go in implementation material. And the reason I say that is once we put examples in application material, it becomes a little too precise sometimes for auditors. And even though it says it's application material, they just take it as part of the standard and run with it. And then we spend a lot of time trying to provide other firm-based application material. So thank you, and appreciate the direction you're taking on this.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Sachika?
Thank you, Tom. With regard to this section relating to risk-based approach, I like this section. I particularly like the addition of paragraph 17A and paragraph A33E. So I really appreciate the task force effort to address the issue people raise about the removal of significant component. But I have still some residual concern around the risk-based approach and the removal of significant component, but I will explain it when we will touch on the section that I have some proposal later. I like the idea by others to streamline the application materials in this section and put more emphasis on the application material that contain important guidance, including paragraph A33E. And I have one comment with regard to paragraph A33J. I'd like to clarify how we should read paragraph A33J. In the middle, it says one or more individuals from a component auditor. And is one or more individuals from a component auditor mean to say to involve certain component auditor? Or is it saying to involve at least one individual from each of the component auditor? Maybe it's my sort of English problem, and moreover, paragraph A33J refers to paragraph 5 of ISA 300, which requires engagement partners and other key members of the engagement team to be involved in planning, including discussion among the engagement team. So does paragraph A33J encourage to involve one or more individuals from a component auditor in the discussion among the engagement team in all cases? I think it may not be practicable in all cases, especially when the group auditor and the component auditors speak different languages. And therefore, I'd like to ask some clarification around this point. That's all for me, this section. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachika. Roger?
Yeah, thanks. Len and the team are strongly supportive of the direction you're going with the risk and paragraph 17A. Agree that have a look and see if it relates to both strategy and planning. So agree on that. Concern is around the proliferation of application material. And worried about important application material being a bit buried. I see some as repetitive, some as educational, and some as superfluous. The paragraphs in particular that I thought you might see for potential removal or reduction 33A, 33B, 33I, 33J, and 40A. 33E is probably the most important in those particular areas. So again, I think, we're just getting so much material. So have a look and see if it's educational or if it's really application material in those particular areas. One other issue I'm hearing a lot about statutory audits and what you're doing in advance. I'd be worried about proliferating statutory audits through the documentation. So if you're going to do something on statutory, probably if you can keep it in the one place, and rather than the alternative, which is going to be spread it across all of the areas which could be done. But that would be my preference, because otherwise I think the document will gain a degree of complexity, but strongly supportive of the direction you're going here.
Keep on moving around, as I said the other day on the Zoom screen. Fernando.
Thank you, Tom. And Len, I'm also in favor of having this section. Very important for auditors to understand the strategy, where to do the work, and who's going to do it. I echo the comments from others in simplifying the application material. Just leaving the key paragraphs would be more helpful and really be benefit for us to focus on what we need to do, why we need to do it, how we need to do it. I just want to come back to the comment from Isabel in terms of the disaggregation, I think, and effectiveness. I personally do not struggle with these two words, but I recognize that languages are different and could have different meanings. So my suggestion is maybe for all of the non-native English speakers that if we think there's an issue with a couple of words or sentences, we should raise that to the task force for their consideration, because I don't believe we want to run the risk of having inconsistencies in the application of the standard just because words mean different to people. And if we can avoid that up front, I think that's going to be in the benefit of everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Kai?
Thank you, Tom. Just coming short here and support the direction that the task force has taken here, but I also do support some of the comments that come up that the application material seems to be somewhat on the long side, and some of the important pieces may get buried in there, so that we can reduce the application material. I think also caution against having too much examples. As we know, examples they tend to get dated as things evolve, and also they could also drive the length, and it's difficult to create examples that have and that work across complexities, sizes, and jurisdictions. So just having that in mind. Thanks.
Okay, that's the last of the hands for tonight on this topic. As I read it, if the goal was to see whether the task force was moving directionally right, I think it's a clear sense that this section's an improvement in the right direction. Lots of, not surprising, since the application material was quite voluminous. Lots of the questions went to that area, and some call for some streamlining. And you got a lot of good suggestions, Len, for consideration, and we probably don't need to debate all of them here. But the task force will have some work, which is what we always had thought would happen after this discussion. Len, any observations on this section?
Just want to say thank you very much for the comments in terms of support, in terms of direction. I'm not too worried about the just speaking for myself, not the task force. But I'm not too worried about the length, the amount of material, because as many of you said, maybe we develop those information, those material. Some can be used for implementation, for staff documents. So at least some investments is being made in terms of addressing a lot of comments that people want more guidance in group audit, whether we put it in the application material, whether it's implementation guidance, we can have a look. But clearly some of the useful comments about specific bullets and language and paragraph 13 Enron and now Qingwei also support that. We'll go back and take a look. And Isabel, Sashiko, and Fernando, your comments about the wording. I know the challenge when we did these Q&A video in different languages, we actually experienced that, try to translate some of the terms in our video presentation. So we'll take that on board and factor in some of the language differences. Helpful comments, and there was one comment about, I think also I saw that through a written submission offline about the equity type of investment, but we thought we had addressed that, but we'll take that a look. Very helpful and very much appreciated in terms of support in this area. This is the meat of this meeting, so I'm encouraged. So thank you very much. And Tom, but perhaps a couple of minutes, maybe I just want to see if you don't mind, the staff and other task force members, they may have anything you want to say.
Any Jasper, Dan, Philly, anything, task force members? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Before we close, and I think we got, as I said, you got very good direction from the board, and based upon the stage of the project, exactly what you were hoping for. And I think we're pointing in this direction, all facing the same way, which is great. Tomorrow we have 6 more sections to go. We want to get feedback on it. The pace, I think maybe will probably not engender as much detailed comments, some of the sections going forward, but we'll have to manage pace a little bit tomorrow, not to short circuit anything, but it is just something to note if we want to get through 6. We got through 3 sections tonight. We have 6 more tomorrow. Also, I wanted to note the minutes of the meetings that I described. The revised minutes, I think, have all been posted now, and please review them, because the hope is that we're going to approve them tomorrow, but there were some comments received and staff responded to those. So if you had comments, please take a look. And then with that, I just wanted to ask Philly, any administrative items you want to raise?
No, Tom, not at this stage. At the end of tomorrow's session, I'll just give a little bit of a preview for April and May.
We're always thinking about next month's activities. This board never rests. So I see our new board members shaking their heads. We didn't tell you about that when you were applying. Okay, we're going to close tonight. A great discussion. Great. Again, congratulations to the EER task force and staff for their big success. And congratulations to Len and team for putting us in a position to get such clear comments. We'll close tonight. We're starting, I have to relook at my agenda at 6 a.m. my time tomorrow. And we look forward to that discussion, less so to my alarm tomorrow morning. I'll see you soon, and have a great rest of the day.